The Budgie Inn always attracts a big crowd for its annual wet T-shirt competition, but last night's celebrations got out of hand. When the crowd of more than 1,000 spilled onto the street, police were called only to be pelted with cans and bottles. Police toiled for 3 hours to disperse the gathering, which turned violent when the pub stopped serving beer at around 7 o'clock. By that time, up to 30 police were on scene. Streets surrounding the pub were blocked off. As police tried to enforce an alcohol-free zone, they were besieged. Filming the melee was resident Ron Spice. At one stage, he was attacked as he stood on his front fence.
I was really worried. I was scared for my life, really.
Residents have condemned the brawl and the competition at the pub which sparked it. Publican Peter McGibbon says he underestimated the number of people the event would attract and he's cancelled future competitions.
Like something like this we won't have again because I don't need the problems. So we'll just have to look at some other way of entertaining people around here.
7 officers were injured, some hit with flying objects, others hurt as they struggled with members of the crowd.
The behaviour of the crowd was something that we shouldn't be seeing in this area or in any area for that matter. And it was probably alcohol-induced, and I'm very disturbed about it.
In all, 37 charges were laid by police against 8 people for a variety of offences including resist arrest, assault police and offensive conduct. All will appear in Wyong Court next month. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
When Coles opened its doors in time for the Christmas rush, huge discounts on groceries brought thousands of shoppers into Garden City. Close by, Woolworths drastically dropped its prices and the battle began.
Where we average about 125,000, 130,000 people through the doors, we're getting about 145, 148, about 10 to 12% increase since Coles has opened.
With collective tankings estimated at several millions of dollars, extra stock was rushed in by the trailer load to cope with the demand. According to management, the arrival of Coles is one of many additions, including updated amenities, 7 retail shops, a post office and more is planned.
We're actually in the final stages now of negotiation with Torres and also a large Lincraft superstore to take up the ex-Coles space upstairs. They're scheduled, if all things go to plan, to be open mid-year this year.
Since the price war began, most retailers have reported healthy sales. Harold Johnson owns a small fruit and vegetable store, but instead of being hurt by the new competition, claims business has never been better.
Our customer count's up about 130, 150 customers a day, and I reckon we're laughing.
While the super cheap prices are gradually returning to normal, an ongoing price war between the supermarkets is tipped to continue, and that's good news for customers.
As long as they're together side by side, because their own competitive natures will make sure that their prices are competitive for an ongoing period now.
Melinda Smith, NBN News.
The inclusion of the Newcastle trio follows several good performances in the Australian Country Championships being played in Albany. Stockton all-rounder Jeff Cook has been amongst the runs and wickets, while Stambridge has scored a century and a 90. Much was selected in the Australian Country side 6 years ago, but speaking from Western Australia this morning, he believed his inclusion this season surpassed that achievement.
I think this is a bit more satisfying. It looks like I'll probably take the new ball, whereas last time I was picked, it was a bit out of the blue, and I just bowled first change.
New South Wales is currently third in the Country Championships and still has a realistic chance of taking out the title.
It looks like if we beat South Australia in the next game, the final game against Queensland, if we knock them off and something happens to Victoria, we'll go very close to winning it.
Meantime, the championships have forced selectors to make several changes to the Newcastle side to play the Cricket Club of India this Sunday. Wicketkeeper David Silkowski and all-rounder Matthew Hodges come into the side after impressing in the Colts Carnival, while Chad White and Greg Charlton have also been included.
The build-up of sand in Wallace Lake has been a pressing problem for the Great Lakes Council. Boating access is becoming limited to the most popular sections of Wallace Lake.
We've got some very serious dredging problems. Siltation in Breckenridge Channel is of great concern to us and has been for a long time.
With no promise of a quick solution, Mr Armstrong says public works engineers and the Great Lakes Council have different views on whether dredging would be worthwhile.
But I'm more than happy to cooperate with Council if we can develop a program that will enhance the area and improve it for both recreational and professional boating.
Recently, Great Lakes Council called for local building firms to dredge the Breckenridge Channel in exchange for the tons of sand. The Mayor says the council lacks the funds to do the necessary dredging. The Deputy Premier Ian Armstrong was also shown the problems associated with sand build-up near the Tuncurry boat ramp. Perhaps the most used ramp in the area, it too is in need of work. Thousands of dollars worth of restorations.
Perhaps shake his purse strings loose and find some additional funding at better than the normal pro rata basis to assist us to get some of these works underway.
Tracy Walsh, NBN News.
When Council dumped its curbside recycling service last year, a drop-off system was introduced. Newcastle has joined with other councils in a recycling strategy aimed at halving the nation's waste stream by the turn of the century. But a recent article in the Bulletin magazine claims a study carried out for the EPA by an independent environmental consulting firm reveals the ambitious target cannot be reached. According to Councillor Tate, the report casts doubts over Newcastle's strategy.
Unless we really get into the green waste recycling and continue with the curbside recycling service, which people will become more and more enthused with as they use it, we're not going to make it.
Of the 900 local councils and organisations surveyed, 3/4 did not have a waste management plan and only 15% have taken up the challenge. But Newcastle Council argues the city will achieve the goal on a local level, even though an overall plan is still to be completed.
Statewide though, they have the problem that not all councils have committed to that level. So any council that commits to that level can certainly achieve it by 2000, I believe.
Meanwhile, tenders will soon be called for yet another weekly curbside service. In line with the Summerhill facility, it's tipped to return mid-year. Melinda Smith, NBN News.
The age of the telegraph ended more than 30 years ago, but the dots and dashes of Morse code were again winging along the wires today. The men of the old Postmaster General's Department stepped out of retirement to celebrate the anniversary of the telegraph line connection from Sydney to Newcastle back in 1860. Happy to be back behind the keys, the operators kept the telegrams moving all day, with no misgivings about their return to Morse code.
Once you learn it, you might slow up, but you never really lose it. It's purely a hobby with us now, and we like doing this, reenacting what used to be years ago with communications.
The telegraph system was phased out in Australia in the early 1960s as a more sophisticated telecommunications network took over. For some, though, the high-tech age of the information superhighway will never compare with the miracle of Morse. Ian Cameron, NBN News.
Bepi Passini has lived in Taree all his life. Unable to walk, he requires a motorised scooter to transport him around town. Over the years, an increase in traffic through Taree has made life more difficult. He says every day he's in jeopardy when he crosses the Pacific Highway to get from one footpath to another.
Putting my life at risk and the other motorists too.
Bepi plans to submit a petition to the Greater Taree City Council for improved access to the CBD for the elderly and disabled. He's already collected 1,000 signatures. He would like to see existing footpaths repaired and more with ramps, similar to the highway intersection on Manning Street.
I used to go to town and to join up at the RSL or the sailing club. Now it's too unbearable to do it because I have to cross the highway.
Mr Passini is unlikely to see any immediate action though. Taree Council saying it's simply doing the best it can with the funds available. Tracy Walsh, NBN News. Teenagers from rowing clubs in Sydney, Armidale and Iluka are among those undergoing a week of intensive training on the Manning River. The group was selected last year during a program aimed at identifying high school students with outstanding potential as rowers.
They are kids that have an enormous amount of will and want, and they also have the raw talent.
Under the leadership of the Technical Development Officer, they're being encouraged to improve their stroke techniques with a view to selection for international competition. The most dedicated will be chosen to compete in the New Zealand National Schools Championships. The young men and women, aged between 14 and 18, have been training regularly for several months to reach this standard as part of the Talented Athletes program. The coaching camp ends this Sunday with a regatta on the Manning River.
The kids will be able to measure their progress by where they've been to where they've come, and the regatta under race stress is a very good opportunity to test where the lessons learnt are implanted.
Tracy Walsh, NBN News.
It's the news residents opposing the plan didn't want to hear.
The EPA is satisfied that the expansion will result in a significant net improvement in the environmental health aspects of the operation of the plant.
The EPA says the extensions to Pasminco will cut lead and sulphur emissions in Bullaroo, but residents are appalled by the support.
The argument seems to have been put that there will be less emissions per unit of output, but at the same time they're talking about increasing their units of output, so the result may be more pollution, not less.
The EPA is still concerned about fugitive emissions that are escaping from the plant without being recorded. It's also called for closer monitoring of nearby creeks and Lake Macquarie, with fears slag stockpiles have contaminated groundwater. But some residents want the plan abolished altogether.
We'd like to see any expansion of this industry based on the idea of complete containment of all emissions. If it can't be done cleanly, it shouldn't be done.
Pasminco has another supporter in the Public Health Unit, which says the extensions should cut pollution. But it says Bullaroo also needs to be revegetated to prevent the spread of contaminated soil that has local children with lead levels twice the national average.
Dust tends to get contaminated with lead, and the more we can prevent that from blowing around the area, then the less absorption you get in children.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
This is what an Adamstown Heights man found as he prepared to take a dip in his backyard pool. 4 potentially deadly funnel web spiders. What's more, they can live for half a day underwater. At Wangi today, another funnel web was found in a routine check of a backyard pool. The ambulance service urges people to take extra care around gardens, pools and outdoor areas during the summer months.
It doesn't hurt to check your swimming pool, check your shoes, check anywhere that you think a spider may be, especially if you're going outside. If you've got shoes outside, you can always check your shoes. Spiders do tend to hide in there.
But if you are unlucky enough to be bitten by a spider,
just keep the patient at rest. Don't wash the wound. Don't remove the clothing. Apply a compression bandage over the site. That means you've got to wind it down and then wind it back up. And then seek medical advice as soon as possible.
The rescue squad was called to catch a menacing red-belly black snake in a backyard at Medford. Many people aren't taking any chances after hearing of a Freeman's Waterhole farmer who was bitten by a tiger snake last night. He was released from hospital and was back on the job this afternoon. Authorities maintain the best way to avoid being bitten by a snake is to give it a wide berth.
What they've got to realise is that the snake is probably just as scared or more scared of them than they are of it. They're a naturally shy animal and they will get away from you as quickly as they can. So don't ever stand in the way of one, let it get out of the way straight away. But try not to panic if you see one.
Rescue services were called to the explosion just before 2 this afternoon. A worker at Brown's Marine Holdings at Tomago was spray painting inside a pontoon.
The 62-year-old male was actually inside the pontoon spray painting, and at some stage an explosion occurred within the pontoon itself.
The worker from Sydney was blown from the chamber. He suffered burns to half of his body. Ambulance paramedics stabilised him before he was transferred to the John Hunter Hospital.
The Scorpions went down by a respectable score, 36-6, in their last clash with the Sea Eagles. While it may sound like a demoralising scoreline, against one of the Winfield Cup's top clubs, Toronto workers were happy with the performance. On Sunday, Manly will be back to face a lineup of fresh faces and potential.
We've given them a good show. Last year they beat us 36-6 and they beat some Sydney sides by a lot bigger scores than that. So it's the ideal trial they're looking for at this stage of the year, and it's good experience for our guys.
The Scorpions have reshaped the team, promoting 4 reserves and buying 4 experienced players. Organisers say the game promises some brilliant football and the visitors may find the competition a little hotter than last year. Meanwhile, there was some more good news for the defending minor premiers. Cardiff Toyota announced a lucrative 3-year sponsorship deal with the club.
With the support we've received from the Workers' Club has set it up to a good stage now, and now with Cardiff Toyota coming on board, it's really set the club up for a very strong financial future, which will help with the recruitment of players.
When Jeff Molesworth first moved to Caves Beach, the council assured him in writing the extension to Caves Beach Road leading into the Pinny Beach development would be temporary. 2 days after they were erected, the developer pulled down 2 council signs alerting potential buyers to the fact that the road was not a permanent thoroughfare.
Why don't they erect it outside his property? Therefore, if the sign is removed, it's an act of vandalism that can be dealt with by the police or whoever.
The road was only open to allow access to the first 80 blocks in the subdivision while a flyover from the highway was built.
Any prospective buyers must be aware that this road will be closed when either the 80 blocks have sold and the overpass is in position.
While residents have applauded the work done by the developer so far on a coastal path, they say a large area of saltbush has been cleared on the beach, which could lead to much of it being washed away in a big tide. They're also concerned that this slope has been constructed with no plans put in to revegetate it.
Definitely lead to erosion.
But with 3 Land and Environment Court actions in process and no guarantees this latest row won't become another, the residents say it's time council took a hard-line approach.
It's costing the ratepayers of this area a lot of money to fight these, so why doesn't the council take responsibility and enforce it?
Joanne Shoebridge, NBN News. As Sydney awoke to a beautiful morning, 3 BOC yachts sailed out of the harbour, Alan Neighbour's craft leading the way in the race to his home port. Meanwhile, 2 of Alan's fellow competitors were winging their way north in a less arduous fashion for a weekend of celebrations in Newcastle welcoming Alan home. Josh Hall became the BOC's first casualty when his sloop hit a submerged ship container.
The worst moment I've ever had at sea was seeing the damage that had been wrought to my yacht.
Neighbour was the only competitor in a position to come to the Englishman's aid.
I went up on deck and I saw the white hull of Newcastle, Australia, coming surfing towards me on the big seas that were running at the time. It was just like seeing my salvation coming. It was unbelievable.
For Josh Hall, Alan Neighbour was not only his rescuer, he's become a lifelong friend.
Alan's a great competitor in this race. He really is outstanding, and he's made a big impact on everybody that he's met.
Frenchwoman Isabelle Autissier spent a traumatic 3 weeks on her dismasted yacht before huge waves tore a gaping hole in the hull.
Of course, it's very difficult to have to ask for some rescue because, you know, I knew I was far away, I knew it would have been difficult, but well, I had nothing else to do.
Meanwhile, the Novocastrian is in familiar waters after an easy sail up the coast. Alan will be a special guest at a concert tonight, put on in his honour by Newcastle Council. Joanne Shoebridge, NBN News. Arthur was arrested in dramatic circumstances on Friday evening after the car he was driving crashed on the Nelson Bay Road. 2 unmarked police cars were damaged. He was later charged with 7 offences, including attempted murder, which related to an alleged incident the night before when a 66-year-old Mayfield West man was attacked by a hammer. The elderly man is in hospital with a fractured skull and 2 broken arms. Arthur also faces charges of using a weapon to avoid apprehension, abduction, assault and stealing from this service station. He did not apply for bail in Newcastle local court. On his request, Arthur will be kept in Long Bay Jail to receive medical attention to self-inflicted injuries to his throat and arms. He'll next appear in court in February.
Hunter Valley scientists have been researching the production of ethanol as an environmentally friendly energy resource. As a fuel for combustion engines, it helps reduce greenhouse emissions. It's also renewable, being processed from crops and forest wastes. Labor's forestry spokesman Bob Martin says it's an exciting prospect, considering that only 38% of the material logged in our forests goes towards timber production.
That's too much waste. What we've got to do is turn that into a valuable product, either by better recovery and increase the efficiency of our sawmills, which we should do and must do. The other thing we must do is not waste those heads and what's traditionally left behind. We've got the trimmings, we've got the sawdust, and now we've got the heads that we can use.
Mr Martin has called on the Fay government to develop an ethanol industry in New South Wales, possibly through a joint venture arrangement with the corporate sector. He says it's an initiative which will certainly become a priority if Labor wins power in March.
To that end, I'll be calling on the corporate sector to sit down with government and the developers of this process to make sure it works. And if we can make it work for the people of New South Wales, we will be a richer society all round.
When Key Insights was first commissioned, the brief from District Commander Heinz Muller was to help the district's 51 sergeants boost their performance and skill. Ellen Davis-Meehan found the morale was so low, many sergeants were counting the number of haircuts until retirement.
I know some that have just got out and others that are waiting to go out, and they're certainly counting the days down.
No, I don't think there's a problem with morale at all. We're an organisation which is changing rapidly from day to day, and probably some of the sergeants might have felt a little bit out of it.
As well as limited opportunities for sergeants to be promoted, the report cited a lack of communication down the chain of command, describing senior management as autocratic and hierarchical. District Commander Muller says the authors don't understand the nature of the force.
We are in a disciplined organisation, often described as a paramilitary style organisation, and we have a hierarchical organisational structure, and directions come down from top and they have to be carried out.
While the report found the service is understaffed, the Newcastle district has the right number of officers according to a formula that determines police strength based on population. However, the finding that officers are overworked and undervalued, the Police Association says, has raised few eyebrows within the service.
I feel sure if this survey had been conducted in any patrol throughout New South Wales, that the result would have been exactly the same. I have no doubt about that.
Superintendent Muller says after talking with sergeants in his command, he will personally address the issues raised. Joanne Shoebridge, NBN News.
Christie is training in Australia and has surprisingly opted to run in 2 meets this summer. Henderson, a silver medalist from Victoria, Canada, believes he's in top shape and is looking forward to running against Christie in Adelaide on Australia Day. Meantime, Manly officials have complimented the Toronto club for its performance in yesterday's 48-12 loss to the Sea Eagles. The Scorpions won the second half 12-6, the Sydney club singling out 5'8" Phil Christensen and lock Adam Hall, who has scored against Manly in each game for the last 3 years. Manly will return to Newcastle early next month to play the Knights in the opening round of the Challenge Cup. To swimming, and the BHP Hunter Club has won the Summer Country Championships. The club used the event to prepare for the state age titles at the Homebush Aquatic Centre starting this Sunday. And the Central Coast Surf Life Saving Association has announced a new prize recognising the best individual in its association. The NBN Surf Life Saver of the Year will be awarded to the most outstanding lifesaver of the summer.
More than 100 gathered at Beach Number 1 for the protest rally. Their concerns the possible sale of Crown land for commercial ventures and the potential loss of character to suit the tourist market. Calm District Manager Tony Wiseman says many are confused about the intentions of the draft plan.
Nowhere in that plan will you find any reference to any sort of resort-style development or any development of a structural nature that would even vaguely be familiar with the Gold Coast or anywhere else.
The plan is on public exhibition until the 18th of next month. Among the contentious proposals are large car parks and a toll for those wishing to access the village.
It's an option of making money so the Trust can go on and improving the area for the public to visit and also for the locals to enjoy.
The wishes of locals to have the Crown land declared National Park have been rejected. Rather, it would become a state recreation area. Mr Wiseman says this would allow the public to access and enjoy the scenic coastline. Tracy Walsh, NBN News.